Hello, everyone. I'm Susanna Grigorian from the Central Bank of Armenia and the Level 1 student at the Global Forecasting School. In this session, I'd like to talk about one of the most important parts of FPAS Mark II that often receives less attention than models and scenarios: human capital. FPAS Mark II is not only about upgrading analytical tools. It is about transforming how a policymaking institution learns, collaborates, and builds expertise over time. For a small open economy like Armenia, where shocks frequently originate from abroad and uncertainty is a permanent feature of the environment, people are just as important as models. In this framework, human capital is treated as a macroeconomic asset. The quality of the central bank's analysis and judgment directly shapes the quality of its policy decisions. Learning is embedded directly into the 29-day policy cycle. Each round ends with a structured review where teams look back at what happened. They examine how accurate the forecasts were, whether the chosen scenarios were relevant to the shocks that ultimately mattered, how clearly the risks were communicated, and how key relationships behaved in practice, such as the Phillips curve, expectations, and transmission channels. The goal is not to avoid mistakes. That is impossible in a world of deep uncertainty. The goal is to learn faster than before and faster than others. Each policy round adds to institutional memory, so that lessons are not lost when people move on or roles change. This repeated learning strengthens credibility because it shows that the institution is adaptable and humble in the face of uncertainty. A key innovation of FPAS Mark II at the CBA is the rotation system in the Monetary Policy Department. The department is organized into 4 teams of 6 macroeconomists. In each policy round, 2 of these teams are actively involved. One team leads and does the heavy lifting of building and running scenarios. The second team provides tactical and technical support. In the next round, they switch roles. Over the course of a year, each team leads one round, supports another, and spends the remaining time on research and development. This rotation serves several purposes at once. It prevents analytical silos by exposing economists to different parts of the framework: forecasting, scenario design, external sector monitoring, financial cycle analysis, inflation decomposition, etc. It broadens staff expertise and helps ensure that the department remains resilient even when key people change roles or leave. It also creates continuity. When a team that was previously in a supporting role becomes the lead team, it can build directly on the analysis, narratives, and lessons of the previous round. Within each round, there are also clearly defined leadership roles. The team lead of the leading team becomes the production or policy round coordinator. This person acts as the intellectual anchor of the round, guiding the daily work, shaping the scenario narratives, and presenting the main content to the board. The coordinator works closely with the head of the Monetary Policy Department throughout the process. 2 experienced economists from the leading team serve as board coordinators from the kickoff meeting up to decision day. Their job is to work directly with individual board members, helping them turn their ideas, concerns, and risk assessments into clear one-page initial macroeconomic risk assessments in both Armenian and English. These one-pagers are then shared with the production coordinator, the head of MPD, and the rest of the team, and they become a key input into the taxonomy of scenarios. Once the Case A and Case B scenarios are finalized, the policy decision is taken and the monetary policy report is published, the round formally ends. Attention then shifts to the next cycle. The team that served as backup now becomes the lead team and takes over responsibility for weekly monitoring meetings and preparation for the next kickoff. The two remaining teams, who are not directly involved in day-to-day policy work, focus mainly on the future. They work on research projects, improve the analytical toolkit, analyze structural themes, and invest in their own professional development. Often, their work feeds into special boxes or background studies that appear in upcoming reports. Because more than half of the year is devoted to this kind of research and development, the department creates space for deeper skill building and innovation, rather than treating learning as an afterthought. All of this is supported by what we call the dynamic learning environment. The idea is straightforward. The department functions best when its members are constantly learning, developing strong analytical habits, and pushing each other to higher standards. Instead of relying on rigid, top-down training, economists are encouraged to engage directly with real problems, learn from one another, and refine their thinking continuously. Much of the learning happens in real time, in daily monitoring meetings, in discussions around scenarios, in preparation for board briefings, and in joint work on the monetary policy report. This environment demands a high level of personal commitment. Staff are expected to take their own development seriously and to approach their work with ambition and accountability. Initiative, critical thinking, reliability, and a willingness to learn from mistakes are not optional extras. They are prerequisites. Without them, it is difficult to sustain the pace of learning needed in a modern policy institution. Another defining feature of the dynamic learning environment is that hierarchy is kept deliberately light on the analytical side. Expertise is widely distributed, and everyone, from junior economists to senior staff, is expected to contribute. Learning happens horizontally as much as it does vertically. This helps avoid two common problems: staff waiting passively for the institution to teach them everything, and institutions assuming that staff already possess all the necessary fundamentals. The DLE is designed to close both gaps. To support this style of learning, staff have access to a broad set of tools: structured internal courses, informal seminars, online resources, and self-directed study programs tailored to individual needs. New staff and board members can use a dedicated onboarding platform that explains the FPAS Mark II framework, its analytical foundations, and the basics of monetary and macroeconomic policy. The Global Forecasting School, run jointly with the Better Policy Project, gives economists direct exposure to real policy debates and hands-on analytical work under expert supervision. It operates more like a workshop than a classroom. Coaching and collaboration play a central role. Senior economists and managers provide regular guidance on analytical work, presentations, and research. Work is often done in teams so that knowledge circulates quickly and ideas are tested from multiple angles. A structured mentorship system pairs less experienced staff with more seasoned colleagues who can provide both technical advice and broader career guidance. Feedback is not limited to annual performance reviews. It is part of everyday life. After presentations, during weekly meetings, and in informal conversations, staff are encouraged to give and receive feedback in a way that is timely, specific, and constructive. This culture of open feedback helps people recognize their strengths and address weaknesses before they become entrenched. It also relies on mutual respect. Giving thoughtful feedback is seen as a professional responsibility, and receiving it with openness is an expectation. Finally, the learning environment is not inward-looking. FPAS Mark II places strong emphasis on external exposure. Staff regularly participate in regional workshops, collaborate with partner central banks, attend international seminars and conferences, and engage in research exchanges with academic and policy institutions. International advisors, visiting researchers, and colleagues from peer institutions provide fresh perspectives and help ensure that the CBA stays aligned with global best practices in uncertainty-aware policymaking. These elements together form a pipeline for future leaders, economists who can design scenarios, prepare executive briefings, and guide the board through complex decisions under uncertainty. But for this to work, there must be clear standards. In the Monetary Policy Department, being a macroeconomist means meeting high expectations across 4 pillars. First, current economic analysis. Economists must be able to assess real, external, financial, and fiscal developments, separate noise from signal, and explain the forces driving the economy today. Second, scenario building and policy analysis. They must be able to construct coherent medium-term narratives, link these to the new Keynesian framework, and assess the policy implications, always with a least regrets mindset. Third, communication. They must translate complex analysis into clear, well-structured messages for the board and for the public, contributing to policy notes, internal briefings, and the monetary policy report. And fourth, modern macroeconomics and research. They need strong theoretical foundations and the ability to conduct empirical or conceptual work that informs policy and strengthens the institution's analytical capacity. On top of this, strong bilingual proficiency in Armenian and English, solid quantitative skills, and comfort with modern programming languages like R, Python, MATLAB, or Julia are expected. These are not just technical details. They are the tools that make high-quality analysis possible. To provide structure and clarity, FPAS Mark II is supported by a human capital system built around clear levels and certification through the Global Forecasting School. Economists advance through a sequence of levels, from entry stage to senior leadership, based on demonstrated competence rather than tenure alone. At the early levels, the emphasis is on mastering current analysis, scenario building, and communication. As they progress, economists are expected to lead research, develop models and tools, mentor colleagues, and eventually shape the analytical direction of the institution. Progression is time-bound, but not automatic. Typically, each level spans about 1 to 2.5 years, with explicit expectations around skills, outputs, and responsibilities. This structure helps keep skills fresh, ensures that the department remains dynamic, and creates a healthy flow of talent within the institution and across the broader economy. Economists who eventually leave the department carry with them rigorous habits and disciplined ways of thinking, strengthening other institutions in Armenia. In FPAS Mark II, learning itself becomes a source of credibility. A central bank that acknowledges past errors, upgrades its tools, improves its communication, and adapts its framework is one that earns public trust. Human capital is not a complement to the system. It is one of its foundations. Models, dashboards, and frameworks matter, but without skilled, motivated, and continuously learning people behind them, they cannot deliver what modern monetary policy requires. Thank you for watching, and I would like to acknowledge Douglas Laxton, Jared Laxton, Asia Kostanyan, and Sopio Mkervalidze at the Global Forecasting School for their guidance and support in producing this video. See you in the next session.